How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, TuneIn Radio, at 4wonline.com/YouTube, as well as twitch.tv/F4W video. Very special show today. We are joined by Dr. Gilbert Lavoie, ShroudStudies.com, the author of The Shroud of Jesus. We will, in fact, be talking the Shroud of Turin here today on the program. It is a packed month of guests here on After Dark Radio. Last week, we were joined by Ross Allison. We talked about ghost hunting here in the Pacific Northwest, particularly the Seattle area. Next week, John Kachuba is joining us also to talk about ghosts. And then January 28th, Tex Wesson will join us here on the show. Once again, we'll be talking about Bigfoot and Dogman, and more. So it's a packed month of guests here on the program. But today, Dr. Gilbert Lavoie, the Shroud of Turin, will be the topic here today. He's got a lot to talk about. He's been studying this for the last 40 years. If you have questions for Dr. Lavoie, you can text us 425-780-7566. That is 425-780-7566. Email Brian at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. I am F4W online on Threads, Instagram. Hey, Cameo. You want a Cameo? F4W online. As well as at Bryan Alvarez on X and Blue Sky. So questions, once again, send them to 425-780-7566. And you can also check out our online store, f4wonline.com/shirts. Should be working. If not, you can go to Pro Wrestling Tees and search Wrestling Observer or Figure 4 online. And we, in fact, have a new After Dark Radio t-shirt. So a lot of fun stuff we're going to get into after the break. Dr. Gilbert Lavoie, the Shroud of Jesus. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. right. Hi, everybody. Back here on the show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio. And we cannot actually get a hold of Dr. Gilbert Lavoie. It's actually kind of weird because I did text him earlier today, and everything was all good to go. And now I try to call, and it doesn't even ring. And then I gave the information to Dom, and he tried to call, and it's not ringing either. So my guess is... Oh, he's texting me right now. Right now, Verizon has shut down. I cannot call out, but I thought I could get calls in. Evidently, that's not the case. Should we do something on the computer? I guess we could probably try and do that, huh? We're going to do this here. What is your email? We're going to do all of this on the air. This is how it works. I'm going to try to send him a link. I want to see if we can get him on this way, because that is our second option. Yeah, apparently there was a big thing that happened here today. And Verizon went down, and I think maybe another one went down. There was some concern that everything was down, and as it turns out, that wasn't the place. But, okay, hold on one second. We're going to do this. It's like they say in wrestling. We can do this the hard way or the easy way. All right, he's at Gmail. Is that breaking kayfabe there with what he's at? All right. I tell him to click this link. So behind the scenes, everybody. You ever been behind the scenes on a radio show? Today's your lucky day. All right, so now if he clicks that link, he will be on. So we're going to give it a shot here and see how it goes. So yes, we're going to be talking the Shroud of Turin here today on After Dark Radio. I'm unprepared for anything else, so this link better work. But I have actually been reading and watching a lot of different things. About a month ago, actually, I watched the David Paulides documentary on Bigfoot, which I thought was pretty good. He very much ventures into the paranormal aspect of Bigfoot, which I know a lot of people are very skeptical about. But I've been reading a lot of other Bigfoot books as well, and you know, there's more and more people talking about how there may be more to this than just like a big ape. And as noted, a lot of people don't like that, but the fact is there are weird things that involve Bigfoot, including there was a photo on David's documentary of this trackway in the snow, and the trackway, it's like there's nothing around these tracks. I mean, there's not other footprints where somebody could have got in or out or whatever. And these tracks just, they're walking. It was like through somebody's yard. And then they just stop. And, okay, it's an ape. Well, where'd it go? It was weird. I'm not really into the whole paranormal aspect of Bigfoot, but, things like that, it is bizarre. Like, why didn't those tracks keep going into the woods? Fall through a hole in the ice, whatever. Why did they just vanish? And in fact, there's a lot of Bigfoot reports where, people will follow trackways for like a mile. They're going a mile into wherever, and they get there and they just end. Out of nowhere, they just end. Like they were taken up or they vanished or whatever. So it is very bizarre. There was also a trail cam photo that there was a guest on Coast to Coast AM. And very rarely do you actually see, Bigfoot. Is this it right here, or is that me? Very rarely does Bigfoot get captured on trail cams. But this was a pretty good. This is a pretty good trail cam shot that they had. It looked like the head and shoulders of something, something pretty big. And they also had found a gigantic track right around the time that they took this trail cam photo, so that was very interesting as well. And here we go. Let's see if this works. Let's try this. Dr. Lavoie, are you there?
Yes, how are you?
Holy smokes, we got you on. This Verizon thing.
Yeah, it's a Verizon thing. It happens it's sort of a midday, and it's just crazy. I thought probably that I could talk to you, but it turns out that I didn't get I wasn't getting your call. Therefore, I can see why what happened. So
Yeah,
that's the situation, unfortunately.
yeah, it was really weird. I mean, we can text back and forth. We just can't call. But
Right, right. So I tried to call. I was at the market trying to call my wife, and all I got was Horizon. Couldn't get anywhere.
well, we
So
are here. We are here now. So let's get going. We're live on the air. We're talking the Shroud of Turin here today, and you have written a book. You got a website. You got a book. You've been studying this for 40 years. The Shroud of Jesus, and I guess we'll just start off by telling everybody what is the Shroud of Turin.
okay, the Shroud of Turin. Well, it's wonderful to be here with you, and I'm delighted to do that.
Thank you.
The Shroud of Turin is a cloth it's 14 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, and on you see some burn marks that are parallel on this cloth that occurred in 1532. However, in between those parallel burn marks is the image of the back and front of a naked man, and he has all the marks on him, blood marks and so forth, and wounds that are compatible with exactly what you see in the Gospel of John. When you read the Gospel of John and the Passion of Jesus, you have exactly what's on the shroud. And whatever John talks about is on the shroud, and whatever's on the shroud, John talks about. So it's really wonderful in the sense that, in that this is truly a crucified man that was buried in this cloth. That evidence alone tells us that John was there as the witness and really wrote it down. So it's amazing.
So the Shroud of Turin, I guess the first historical references to it were 1300 AD or so. Is that correct?
What is it? It showed up in Illyria, France in around the 1350s, and then it went from there and went to Chambray, France, where this fire took place in the chapel and caused the burns that we see on it, burn marks. Then it went to Turin, and it's been in Turin ever since. In the 1980s, it was actually owned by. Before that, it was owned by the House of Savoy, and then it was willed finally in the 1980s to the Pope, the Catholic Church. So but there's certainly a history of it prior to that. Those who have studied icons like this, and I've talked to a fellow from Harvard, Dr. Ernst Kitzinger, way back in 1978. He said the experts like ourselves, and there's just a few around the world who study icons, that we believe that the Shroud of Turin is actually the Shroud of Constantinople. It was in Constantinople. And then we have some other history that brings us back into all the way back to Jerusalem, starting from, but these are not firm. These are legends, a legend of Abgar that brings you into Turkey, and where the shroud was for a period of time. And then it eventually went from there then to Constantinople. So that's the history of it. Well, the wonderful thing about that is that I met Dr. Max Fry in 1978, and he had done studies on the shroud. He put sticky tapes on the shroud and discovered these pollens that were there, and did a 5-year. When I met him, he had done a 5-year study and found out that these pollens weren't only from Europe, France, and Italy, but they were from places like Constantinople, Asia Minor, and Palestine, even into Jerusalem. So we have on the shroud, because of these pollens and the work of Dr. Max Fry, that this actually has an itinerary taking you all the way back to where Jesus lived, died, and resurrected.
All right, well, hold that thought. We're going to head to our first commercial break. We're going to be back in just a moment, everybody. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday. Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and Twitch. Very happy today to be joined by Dr. Gilbert Lavoie. We're talking the Shroud of Jesus, the Shroud of Turin. I guess I've been pronouncing it wrong. But Dr. Lavoie, is the Shroud still available publicly today? Like, is there a place you can visit and see it, or is it brought out here and there for display purposes?
Yeah, it's brought out for display purposes over time. For example, 1978, 1998, 2010, 2015. It was thought it was going to be brought out in 2025, but that did not happen. So, but you can, with all the photographs and so forth of it. One, for example, if you want to see beautiful photographs of the Shroud of Turin, I suggest that you go to our website. which is actually Vernon Miller, the work of Vernon Miller. Vernon Miller was the scientific photographer in 1978 who did beautiful photographs of the Shroud, and we have his whole, the best of his collection on shroudphotos.com. That's shroudphotos.com. So anybody wants to get there and look at that, they can see beautiful photographs of the Shroud and micrographs and so forth. It's just a wonderful website that you could spend hours looking at all the photographs. He was a very good scientific photographer. He and I were good friends. And so after he passed away, a colleague of mine, Tom DeMahal, and myself put that together so everybody could have it and look at it. You can even download some pictures if you want to put them up on your wall and so forth, and it won't cost you anything to download them. You got to follow the rules, of course, of what you can do with them, but certainly downloading it and putting up on your wall, that's not a problem. So people can have, everybody in the world can have an access to the Shroud of Turin through that website.
You know, I never really thought about it until I was reading about the Shroud, but it's been talked about for 700-800 years now. But obviously, it wasn't until recently, historically, that the first photographs of the Shroud were taken. And
exactly.
was this like a revelation at the time when there finally were photos out of this Shroud of Turin? Had enough people heard about it that it was a really big deal, or did most people discover the Shroud at the time that the photos came out?
Yeah, what happened was previous to that, when you look at the Shroud, the image is a little bit vague, and so what happened was when photography was invented, finally in 1898, the first photograph of the Shroud was done by a man by the name of Secunda Pia, lawyer and amateur photographer. And what happened, we had these large cameras at those times, and he took his negative plate for developing, and when he developed it, he developed the image of the man. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He saw a full, beautiful, positive image of the front and back of a man, and he couldn't figure out why. And actually, he was so astounded, he believed that he was seeing for the first time the face of Jesus and the body of Jesus. So he thought about it, and he realized that what was on the original cloth is actually a negative, and on his negative there was a positive image. And the big question was, of course, how did a negative image get onto an ancient cloth when photography was only invented in the 19th century, I should say. And so that became a major phenomena, and that information really went around the world at that time. And then that's when scientists and so forth got very interested and began doing studies of the Shroud, trying to understand how this image got on this cloth and so forth. And every generation has its new technology, and so every generation has applied new technology to try to understand how this image was transferred from body to cloth. And to this day, no one has an answer to that. I mean, there's a lot of, let's say, hypotheses. For example, radiation and explode, at the time of resurrection, et cetera. But in reality, we do not know how it happened. The interesting part is what you see on there. There are two events that occurred on this cloth, and one are the blood marks. And the blood marks have been looked at and studied by Alan Adler, who is a friend of mine and a chemist and an expert in porphyrins, which is the breakdown of red blood cells. And he discovered that indeed there's this really blood on this cloth. And it also had other particulars that belong to blood itself. So there's basically blood on the cloth, and the blood actually soaked into the cloth. There were basically moist blood clots in the body when the cloth touched the body with the wet moist blood clots. They soaked right into the cloth, actually right through to the back of the cloth. Now on there, so that's what causes the blood marks. The second event is the image. And the image, we know that it's the second event because wherever there's blood, there's no image under it. So whatever caused the image could not penetrate the blood that was already on it. So we know the image is second, and that's very unusual because it's really it's what we call a sort of a yellowing of the fibers. Let's say a thread. Let's put it in context. The cloth itself it's a herringbone weave, and the weave is made up of threads that are made of tiny fibers, and that comes from the plant flax. Each one of these fibers is way less than the diameters of the hairs on your head. And so when you look at it and start looking at the image and the source of where the image is coming from, you find that the image only penetrates the cloth one fiber deep. In other words, less than half the diameters of the hairs on your head that it penetrates the cloth. Nothing soaks down through the cloth or wicks along those fibers. Therefore, there is no paint or dye or stain that cause them. What causes the yellowing of that fiber to cause the image is heat, light, and acid can do that. But absolutely no one has reproduced this shroud image at that microscopic level. So it is unique in the whole world. There is nothing like it. Absolutely unique. So that's the makeup of it.
The interesting thing is you mentioned it's a negative, and if you open a book or if you Google an image, most of the images you see of the shroud are black and white. But obviously the shroud is not black and white. But basically, the image itself, when you take a photograph, is easier to see on the negative, correct?
That's exactly right.
Yes.
See, there's of course a lot of the people that are listening. In my day, in the 1980s and 90s and whatever, when we took a photograph, we'd have a positive and negative. Okay.
Yes.
And so we're very familiar with that. So we're just taking pictures now digitally, and we don't see that. But this is the opposite. In other words, what you see is white, and what you see as light color is dark. What you see as dark is light on the negative, and what you see as light is dark on the other. So it's just the opposite. And you can recognize, of course, your friend and so forth. If your friend or your brother or sister has a negative, you can see that it's your brother or sister, but it's not as clear as if it's a positive. And that's what's happening here. It's negative on the cloth itself, but positive on the negative image, and that's what you're seeing. You're right. When you see pictures, for example, in the front of my book, The Shroud of Jesus and the sign John Ingeniously Concealed, that book shows a positive image of the man, which is actually the negative plate, you might say. So you're right. That's what it is.
I mentioned that because one of the craziest theories that I heard back in the day was some people's theory was that the shroud was actually a picture of Leonardo da Vinci. Like he had somehow found a way to take a photograph hundreds of years before it was actually discovered. And this was like the very first photograph. But obviously the problem is the shroud, even people who don't believe it's Jesus' burial cloth, the carbon dating goes back much further than Da Vinci's lifetime. So I presume that wouldn't even be possible if it doesn't seem to work out historically, even if it's not the burial shroud. We're going to head to a quick break. We'll be back in a moment to talk more. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Stand by, everybody. We are sending Dr. Lavoie another link because his microphone dropped. So hold on one second. We were just getting into the thick of things here. GR, there we go. All right. Tell him it's sent. All right. Let's see if we can get him connected this way as well. And then we shall continue on. Got a lot of interesting questions. Very interesting. I want to talk to him about the fact that this I don't know how much he follows all sorts of aspects of the paranormal, but it actually reminds me, yes, of Bigfoot. Oh, here he goes. Maybe I'll bring this up to him. All right, let's see if the microphone is working. Dr. Lavoie, can you hear me? Oh, man, I can't hear him. Appears to be muted. I'm having another problem. Yeah, he appears to be muted. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, we can't hear you for some reason. And I'm not sure why it has muted him. That is interesting. You are muted. So we'll see if we can figure this out. Otherwise, Dr. Lavoie will rebook you when Verizon is working. So that may have to be the next step here, because we still can't hear you, unfortunately. All right, maybe I should try. Should we go behind the scenes and try and give him a call? I'm going to try to call the Verizon number one more time. So stand by. He can hear me, but his line is muted, so we can't hear him. Let's try this. Let's see if Verizon is working yet. Cross your fingers, everybody. It's not looking good. Not looking good. No, man, not even calling. Not even calling. Let's see what's going on. Verizon outage here today. Let's see what it says here. Verizon has gone down. Mysteriously, it says here. So let's find out what it has to say about that. You guys going to get the breaking news on Verizon here on the show, which I could tell you if there wasn't a pop-up. All right, more than 1 million Verizon users experience outages. So that's obviously a problem. Emergency alerts in Washington, D.C. as a result of this outage. Nation's largest wireless provider said its engineers are working to identify and solve the issue quickly. Verizon said on Wednesday its wireless service suffering an outage impacting cellular data and voice services. Engineers are engaged, working to identify and solve these issues quickly. Swath of social media comments directed at Verizon. They did believe that T-Mobile and AT&T were also affected, but apparently they were not. Apparently people... I guess people were attempting to contact people on Verizon, and when it didn't work, they figured theirs was down as well, but it was actually all Verizon. But anyway, looks like we're not going to have Dr. Lavoie finishing the show here today, but I will get him rebooked as soon as possible, and that'll be that. So I was talking about how does the Shroud of Turin remind me of Bigfoot? I'm glad you asked. Well, if you look at the Patterson footage, Patterson-Gimlin film, which has never, or despite what you might have heard, been proven to be a hoax, despite what many people have claimed, the biggest thing to me is that that was filmed in the late 60s by a cowboy. And it has now been 60 years or so since that, 55 years or so since that footage came out, 60 years. And nobody has been able to recreate it. And you would think that with an additional 60 years of technology, the ability to create costumes and prostheses and whatever else, you would think that in 65 years, somebody could go out there and do a Bigfoot recreation of the Patterson film that is as good as or better than the actual Patterson film. And to this day, nobody has been able to do that. And you know what we were talking about with the Shroud of Turin, which I didn't know the details of how the image was on the front of the shroud, but you know, he noted that the image only goes down less than what did he say? Half the width of a human hair. Like, it doesn't soak all the way into the shroud, and no one's been able to recreate it. That is true. No one has ever been able to recreate the shroud. And, you know, if you believe it is a burial cloth of Jesus, then obviously it has not been. Dr. Lavoie's texting me. If you believe it is a burial shroud of Jesus, and obviously it hasn't been recreated for that reason. But at the same time, if you don't, if you just believe, well, you know, they carbon date it to 1300, 1400 AD, well, the fact is that's 700-800 years ago. How come we're unable to recreate that? How come we are unable to put an image on cloth that only goes down half the length of a human hair? So it is very interesting that in both these cases, the Patterson film and the Shroud of Turin, neither of them are able to be recreated by anybody. I'm going to tell him we're going to have Andrew rebook him. Andrew Lutsky is our producer. I'm telling him the show is close to ending. Sorry. These things happen. This will be a great one to replay, Dom. All right, we'll send him that message. I'll tell him I appreciate it. I'll appreciate what we could do. All right. Well, let's look at some of the news, everybody. We got news to talk about here. We'll do news for the remainder of this program, because over the weeks I do collect a lot of different things. So let's take a look at what we've got. There was an effort. We'll read this one right here. There was an effort recently to make Bigfoot the official state cryptid of California. Cryptid obviously is an unknown animal. And February 14, 2025, Chris Rogers of the California legislature proposed Bill AB 666 to designate Bigfoot the official state cryptid. He says existing law establishes a state flag and the state's emblems, including, among other things, the golden poppy as the official state flower and the California redwood as the official state tree. The bill would state the intent of the legislature to enact legislation that would designate Bigfoot as the official state cryptid. California has 42 official state symbols already, and obviously there's a lot of them. According to the California Civil Liberties Advocacy, this is from the from the recorded opposition to this bill. According to the California Civil Liberties Advocacy, we live in a time when conspiracy theories and pseudoscience threaten everything from public health to democratic stability. Instead of upholding the principles of rational governance, this bill signals that California's legislature is willing to indulge in the same kind of post-truth nonsense that fuels climate change denial, anti-vaccine hysteria, and yes, even wild conspiracies like chemtrails. And they put an exclamation point. So they were opposed to that, and I guess Bigfoot at this point is not officially the state cryptid of California, which is I don't know. I guess it's too bad. Should mention actually also some sad news. You guys remember the famous book Chariots of the Gods? I think that book came out in 1967. Let's find out. I remember when I was a kid, Chariots of the Gods was 1968. So I was 7. Eric von Daniken wrote that book, and he went on to write a series of books, actually, all ancient astronaut theory. And he passed away this week. I believe he was... How old was Eric von Daniken? I think he was like 89, 90. He was 90 years old. Passed away on January 10th. And he had been involved in I mean, basically, if you've ever watched Ancient Aliens, you know, if you've ever heard ancient astronaut theory, if you've ever heard some theory about Stonehenge, pyramids, the Nazca Lines, anything that involves ancient aliens, I can't say that he necessarily invented the concept, but he absolutely popularized it with Chariots of the Gods. That book sold millions and millions of copies. And he went on to write a number of other books as well. If we can find out how many books did he write when I was a kid. Man, he's like 24 books. Chariots of the Gods, Return of the Stars, Gods from Outer Space, Gold of the Gods, Miracle of the Gods, In Search of Ancient Gods. And, you know, he kept, he was in the game, so to speak, for decades afterwards. And I remember, I was watching some Ancient Aliens probably 10 years ago. And I remember being astonished, like, oh my God, Eric von Daniken is still alive. Because this book came out before I was born. And I figured, man, he must have been like 50, 60 when he wrote this book. This was 1968. Apparently he was, born in 1926. 68 minus 1926. 42 years old when he wrote the book. So, I mean, he was on Ancient Aliens probably, for years and years and years. And it's actually interesting if you watch that show. There are a lot of individuals in the UFO game, so to speak, who are getting way up there. I mean, for those of you that remember the glory days of Art Bell, Linda Moulton Howe used to always call in the 90s with the reports. She's still on Ancient Aliens. I think she's almost 90. And Eric von Daniken was 90. And Jacques Vallée, I think, is 86, 87 years old. But very sad to hear that Eric von Daniken passed away. Skeptical, to say the least, of a lot of what he wrote. I think most people are. But he stuck to his guns, so to speak. So, all the best to his friends and family. The death of Eric von Daniken. All right, what else have we got here? There's always news of some sort or another in the world of the paranormal. Let's see. I've actually read a couple of books of late. Still working on some others. The book that Raven recommended, I have been reading that one. Is actually Everything You Know. I forget everything you know. Everything you didn't know is something like that. Anyway, I'll go find it during the break. But I've been reading that one. And then I got to show you another book after the break, which I found. I actually got it off eBay. Paid a fair amount of money, but I'll tell you why in a moment. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. We're almost done. We made it this far. Everything you know is wrong. That's what I was trying to say. Everything you know is wrong. Lloyd Pye. The guy who's always talking about the Star Child skull. Actually, I think he passed away in 2013. Reading that one. My favorite guy on Ancient Aliens. David Hatcher Childress. Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of the Southwest. Someday I'll tell the story of this book. That's one of my favorites. And then, when I was a kid, I checked this book out at the Kingsgate Library probably 50 times. This may have been the beginning of my interest in all of this. And I found this on eBay. This book has been out of print probably as long as I've been alive. Mysteries, Monsters, and Untold Secrets by George Laycock. 15 unresolved questions that have baffled science. I believe it was written in 1978. I was 3 when this book was written. And man, I checked it out over and over and over again. Whatever that thing is on the front cover, is that like the Jersey Devil or Loch Ness Monster or something like that? Man, burned into my psyche. So anyway, I've been reading that one again. It's actually a really interesting book. It's like, I think it's a book kind of for kids, obviously. But it's quite like, I don't know how to explain it. There's a way that people used to write that they don't write like that anymore. And this guy was a solid writer. I don't think this was necessarily his forte, but it was good storytelling. So I like that book. But anyway, thank you if you're still listening, for listening to me ramble for most of the last hour. Completely unprepared for anything except an interview which fell through. I appreciate it. I promise we'll get Dr. Gilbert Lavoie back on as soon as possible. Just barrel on through, everybody. Don't be John Cena. Don't give up. I'll talk to you next time. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.